I think it's going to become increasingly untenable because I think you're going to start to see a lot of the Republican leaders, who are now realizing that their fortunes and their futures are no longer so directly tied to Donald Trump, are going to begin to pull back. You even saw Lindsey Graham, who may be or may have been until yesterday Donald Trump's closest friend, closest colleague in the Senate, beginning to talk about a Biden presidency and working with him, and that they have a good personal relationship. So I think you're going to begin to see more and more of that from Republican leaders in the Senate and the House and around the country. The other thing I think we do have to point out is how unnormal, how abnormal that this is, because, I've been studying up on Mitt Romney because of the fact that, as I say, I'm going to have him as a guest tomorrow. Back in 2012, when he was the losing candidate, it was about 11:30 at night when we called Ohio and the presidency for Barack Obama. And Romney had, as all these candidates do, an army of lawyers who are ready to go out to airports, to go around the country, to challenge. There always are questions about the vote count in various states. And he waited for 90 minutes, Romney did, and then he called President Obama and he conceded. And that is what people do. It's always hard to accept. Hillary Clinton needed some time until the next morning, if you remember, before she came out and conceded to wrap their heads around it. But in the end, they look at the overwhelming math and they do concede. And, there are things that happen. The president invites, if he loses, invites the winner into the White House to have that meeting in the Oval Office, the two of them sitting in the wingback chairs together. You begin to see members of the winning team, the transition team, being invited into all the departments. You do get the concession speech. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we don't get that, and I think the Biden campaign has been prepared for that, they can go ahead, but it certainly cuts into the transfer of power that most Americans expect every year.
As another day passes and the majority of this country, as well as the rest of the world, celebrates the victory of Joe Biden, there's still one person who refuses to accept this reality, and that is Donald Trump himself. And if that wasn't bad enough unto itself, the fact that he's being called out on Fox News for it makes it all the worse. Now, Donald Trump and his campaign are hell-bent on pretending that there's some nationwide election fraud being perpetrated against him.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech.
Right. I mean, how else could he have possibly lost by nearly 5 million votes and counting, if not for fraud? Especially considering the amount of boat parades that the campaign had touted in the final days of the campaign. Surely Joe Biden turning out more people than Donald Trump was a statistical impossibility. Now, what they're claiming are a number of things. They brought a lawsuit forward in Georgia alleging that 53 ballots were delivered after the cutoff, for which they had zero evidence, and their case was dismissed. In Michigan, they claimed that observers weren't being allowed to watch ballots being counted. When the judge hearing the case asked the campaign if the campaign had representatives in the room where ballots were being counted, the campaign conceded that yes, they did, thereby proving that their entire case was baseless and it was dismissed. They brought forward another observer case in Philadelphia that was also dismissed, and these cases continued around the country to the point where the Trump campaign is now 0 for 10 in their election fraud litigation efforts. Seems like they finally did get tired of all the winning. But bogus cases and the spate of losses aside, the Trump campaign continues regardless to pretend that they're the victims of fraud. They're pretending that Democrats cast millions of illegal ballots and that none of their supporters are being allowed to watch ballots being counted, suggesting that statewide fraud is occurring where the counters are rigging the election. Forget the fact that the only ballots that are being counted are those that were cast on or before November 3rd. Forget the fact that in all of the rooms where ballots are being counted, there is always a Democratic and Republican representative observing the process, because this isn't about any legitimate claims, it's about concocting whatever story they can to present themselves as the victims. It is a PR campaign to try and distract from reality. And the reason for this is twofold. The first is, what else but money? The Trump campaign has been sending out email after email begging for money for their supposed election fraud commission. But here's the thing, Trump knows he lost, his campaign knows he lost, and the majority of the American people know he lost. This is just one last-ditch effort to squeeze as much money out of his supporters as he possibly can. And if that means he has to use this idea of election fraud as a front to do that, then guess what? That's exactly what he'll do. Because to Trump, his supporters are nothing more than untapped wallets. And the second reason is Trump's ego. His entire identity is predicated on winning. And what makes this particular loss so painful is that it wasn't even the entire GOP that lost. Republicans actually gained seats in the House. They fended off a Democratic effort to take the Senate. They took state legislatures. The only real loser then was Trump. This wasn't a repudiation of the Republican Party, it was a repudiation of him and him alone. But because Trump is too fragile to accept that, he has to pretend that there was some systemic fraud and that the whole system was rigged. And so he'll play the same old song and dance he always plays and cry victim and undermine trust in the most fundamental tenet of our democracy, our free and fair elections, all because he's too much of a baby to accept the fact that he lost. And look, I get that it's hard. It's probably even harder because Trump has made it abundantly clear how weak those who lose are. And now that's exactly what he is. He groomed his entire party to loathe the very thing that he himself has become. I'd say I felt bad for him, but I seem to remember something about the Republicans branding themselves as the party of personal responsibility. But frankly, Trump's insecurities are not our problem as a nation. So if he's worried about looking like a weak loser, that's on him to sort out. But the security of this country is largely predicated on trust in our institutions. And the fact that Trump is willing to tear those down because of his own ego goes to show just how dangerous it is having a malignant narcissist serving as president. At this point, Trump doesn't stand to gain anything, but the country stands to lose. So Trump will continue to throw his temper tantrums and pound the table and stomp his feet. He'll continue to cry fraud on Twitter and at press conferences and on Fox News, but the process of counting votes in this country is secure, and the results will be certified, and Joe Biden will take office on January 20th as the 46th president of the United States. And that'll happen whether Trump approves of it or not. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.